So welcome to the Visiting Poets series in celebration of April as National Poetry Month. A quick announcement, the Creative Writing Workshop class is sponsoring a poetry and flash fiction reading and open mic next Wednesday, April 20th at 2:30 at the Manzanera Street Coffee House. You're all welcome to read in the open mic or just to attend and enjoy that. So I want to thank you all for supporting poetry at New Mexico Tech. We see a lot of students here, people from the community and colleagues and poets. I want to thank you all for being here. We've had Lynn Denning has attended every year. I had to count up how many. We've done this 10 years, I think now. Every year
started it.
For 10 years, yeah. And other Barbara Bonnekessen from our department, Karen Balsh, who is a poet. So thank you, and all the students who are here and community members. I'm Mary December, and I am the chair of the Department of Communication, Liberal Arts, Social Sciences that sponsors this reading every year. I want to thank Ann Hewitt, our administrative assistant for the Department of Communication, Liberal Arts, Social Sciences, for all her help in getting detail after detail completed for this event each year. I also want to thank Tom Gingrich, Public Information Officer, for his great article publicizing the event, and also thanks to the Defensor Chiefin for running the article. And the third Smutbusters, and also to Michael's Poetry, did I say that correctly, who is our camera person from Distance Education for taping this event, so thank you to Tom also. And I especially want to thank Michael's Different Reading Visiting Poet for 2011, holder of a BA from Yale University. For many years, Michael and his wife, Noreen, who's here with us too, wrote marketing documents for executives of IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and the Electric Power Research Institute. They left Silicon Valley for Santa Fe in 1995. In July 2002, Michael received his MFA in writing from Vermont College. That fall, he began teaching a series of student poetry workshops at St. John's College in Santa Fe. In the last few years, he has privately taught a half a dozen writers how to create impactful poems, stories, articles, essays, memoirs, and novels. He says the basic secrets are the same, and he will be sharing some of those secrets with us tonight. Albuquerque's Amador Press published his book of poetry and prose, Silicon Valley Escapee, in 2000. It's back on the table. I have my copy. Santa Fe Sunstone Press published his poetry collection, Whirling Backward into the World, in April 2006, as well as his first novel, Acting Badly, in his Santa Fe trilogy. And I have my copies. There's copies back there that you can get. The second novel, Making Crazy, came out in 2009. I have that one too. And the third, Smutbusters, I don't have yet because that'll be out in 2010. And his third book of poetry, Bewilderment, will be published next year by Sunstone Press. Michael's poetry is rich, growing out of a heart seeking authenticity in a resistant world. His fiction captures the awkwardness of being human, often highlighting characters whose awkwardness is revealed in what they believe is a display of finesse. He has the uncanny skill of showing through the speech and the actions of the characters their often self-centered motivations and their inability of self-reflection that is symptomatic of the socio-political climate in which they revel, and they do. I enjoy Michael's novels and his poetry immensely. They're different, though. Different reading and both wonderful. On the personal note, I met Michael and his wife Noreen at one of our Visiting Poet events a few years ago. Michael and Noreen came up to me and they said, we come here every year and we stay in San Antonio.
Casablanca B&B.
Yeah, the Casablanca B&B. And we love the New Mexico Tech campus. We even like the cafeteria food. I don't know if you actually said that to me or not. And they said, and we're poets from Santa Fe. And we didn't know that there were poetry events in Socorro at New Mexico Tech. And I said, yes, there are some. Once a year we have this. And then we also have other events, creative writing contest and other things throughout the year. So we do have poetry events here. And so Michael kept in touch with me, wanted to find out what I teach in the department, find out more about our department, and he and Noreen have been huge supporters of what we do here, and they have interests in all of the areas, as you will see as Michael talks, in all of the areas of tech, in the sciences and engineering and technical aspects, as well as the humanities aspect and the writing aspect. So it was a real thrill for me to meet them that way, and we've kept a wonderful ongoing relationship since, and it's really an honor for me to have Michael come, and he came up with a really interesting, I thought, tech-focused type of diverse reading. He is an incredible poet, but he also does so many other things that he wanted to share those with us in this hour. So let's welcome Michael Scofield.
Thanks a lot, Mary. Thanks to the university for inviting me to be a visiting poet this year. And thanks to Public Information Officer Tom Gingerich for his hard work. And I'd like to make two announcements. One, I just love Q questions and answers. It's often the most entertaining part of the evening. So I hope you'll be able to concentrate at least on this first part. And if you have questions, ask. Second part is that if you want to buy any of the books, I'm discounting them $5, so $5 off the cover price. Great crowd. My wife Noreen and I started coming down here 10 years ago, as Mary said, to visit the Bosque del Apache, staying at the Casablanca B&B in San Antonio. Then we discovered your beautiful tech campus. And a few years ago, we made friends with Mary. Here's how we've planned this evening for you. I'll talk for 15 minutes about my experiences with poetic and technical writing. You'll probably have questions, so another 15 minutes for those. Then I'll read a few poems, and Mary will read a few of hers. I'll read a short excerpt from one of my novels dealing with a poet who sadly makes a fool of himself.
No. Never happened.
More time for questions. Second Q&A time. Ending with refreshments and signing any books you'd like to buy. I'm going to start the talk with a quote from the famous 18th century maker of dictionaries, Samuel Johnson. Quote, no man but a blockhead ever wrote except for money. I haven't made much money yet writing creatively, but my wife and I did make big money in Silicon Valley after I left Sunset Books and Magazine there in 1986. What I hoped to do was start my own writing business. Why not write for high-tech companies? I'd been managing editor of our college's science magazine. So I hired a business consultant and joined a networking group. On interviews, I discovered this, that editors in marketing and corporate communication departments had no interest in reading the few articles that I'd already written. All they wanted to know was that these had been published. Fine, but I'd done no technical writing since winning an undergraduate essay contest 30 years ago. And that's 30 years before 1986. So here's what I did. I took the issue of the magazine that my essay was published in from 1956, Yale Scientific, and I whited out the date. And I whited out the year I graduated, 1958. I made photocopies of it and took it around to editors at various companies. This particular article got me my first for-pay assignment in the Valley. It was on an early version of the mass spectrometer. Now, you all probably know, does a mass spectrometer still exist? I assume it does. Well, it's far more sophisticated than this model. The editors didn't seem to care. They didn't seem to care. So I got my first assignment through the networking group and presenting copies of this article to the Hewlett-Packard company, the employee magazine. And it turned out not to be a technical article, but hey, I got the first spread. It was talking about HP stock, how it was doing. As time went on, I got assignments from other companies. All sorts of assignments. Once I was in the HP magazine, I mean, that was As far as editors at other companies, that was big time. They didn't even care what the article was about. So we do technical reports. We do innovations, technical innovations sheets. We used to call these, sometimes we call these backgrounders. I don't know if, is that a term that's used today, backgrounders? It gives a history of how something was invented and what its benefits are now. Let's see. Every journal articles for in-company magazines. And newsletters. Newsletters are a lot of fun. This guy went hog wild. He was kind of bored with his technical work, and he found an artist to jazz up the newsletter and increased it from 4 pages to, I think we ended up with 12-page newsletters. What I'm saying is that if you can make the technical writing fun to read, it helps the editors out a lot. It makes their job less boring. And before we knew it, within a year, we had more business than we could handle. I persuaded my wife to leave her job with the Hewlett Foundation and come and help. And we wrote 5 hours a day, 60-hour weeks. This is from Sun Microsystems, employee magazine. And this one is from Rome Systems, all within a few miles of each other in Palo Alto and Mountain View. Some tips. If you want to start your own technical and marketing writing business, 2 things are of great importance. Work only with well-financed companies. We found that out the hard way. If you want to get paid, work with well-financed companies. And the second thing, which I've never heard anybody else talk about, but it inevitably works, get to know the accounts payable person. Even take that person to lunch. You'll start getting paid faster. As I said, within a year, Noreen had joined me. We had more business than we could handle, so we started raising our rates because already we were working a 60-hour week. 2 factors accelerated our growth. More tips. First, and this may surprise you, I don't know, we operated ethically. It was a pragmatic thing. We did what we promised. If we couldn't meet a deadline, we phoned ahead to set a different date. If we made a mistake, if a customer complained about anything, we refunded or modified the fee, no questions asked. And word got around. And the second thing is, I started writing poetry for about an hour every morning before tackling the 4 pay assignments. Why? I enjoyed reading poetry. And I found that writing it helped me strengthen skills that make technical and marketing writing far more interesting to read, according to feedback from clients. Such as what? Most of the 6 skills coming in a minute include actual excerpts from my wife's and my published reports, articles, flyers, newsletters, backgrounders, and news releases. After we're through here, on the signing table over there, you can take with you a separate handout that lists the examples that follow. Number 1, boil down wordiness. I'm sure you've heard this from Mary and some of the other instructors, some of this. Boil down wordiness. That means usually 3 rewrites. When I taught writing poetry at St. John's College in Santa Fe, 8 rewrites were not uncommon. And believe me, clients will insist on rewrites. I brought an example of what I mean by rewrite. This is actually from my first novel, Acting Badly. Can you see that? That isn't just, that's acting ruthlessly on your manuscript as best you can. Secondly, use similes and metaphors so the reader can picture the new device, application, or process you're describing. For instance, quote, having a networked home is like owning your own programmable robot. A simple simile. Use what I used to call when I was teaching power verbs. For instance, don't write, demo engineers gave visitors an overview. Do write, demo engineers dazzled visitors with an overview of Sun Microsystems high-end servers. Use active verbs, not passive voice. For instance, don't write, quote, startup by the utility was achieved 2 weeks earlier than anticipated. Do write, the utility achieved startup 2 weeks earlier than anticipated. Number 5, to maximize impact of what you're writing, use touch, smell, or sound, as well as sight, just as poets do. Don't write, air source heat pumps are easy to find in the yellow pages. Do write, with air source heat pumps, you can just walk your fingers through the yellow pages. And number 6, be specific. Don't write the headline, Hewlett-Packard to host meeting for analysts in New York in May. Do write the headline, Hewlett-Packard to host 200 analysts at a 2.5-hour breakfast meeting in New York in May. Some engineers bought all of this right away. Some balked at first, did not want a word of their research write-ups changed. But finally, most realized that pats on the back had increased with a more powerful writing. So, for those of you who aren't already writing poems, how do you start? I use, myself, one of 2 methods I used to teach students. Notice that I suggest composing first drafts in a notebook rather than typing them on a screen. That may seem antediluvian to some of you, but the effort to write by hand often helps you be more honest. Here are the 2 methods. Number 1, sit down staring at a blank page. Close your eyes. Identify the emotion or 2 emotions you're feeling most strongly at the moment. Then visualize what image, touch, smell, or sound seems to be linked to that emotion. Open your eyes and start writing. If you're feeling nothing, write about that. Don't try to force it or look or sound poetic, and edit your first draft hardly at all. Miriam, one of the people in the audience knows, Karen knows Miriam Sagon. She talks about that over and over and over. Edit your first draft hardly at all. Second method. Sit down staring at a blank page, close your eyes, decide what topic you're most afraid to write about, or what 2 topics. Open your eyes and start writing. And here's a tip. Put your first and the following drafts in a drawer for at least 2 weeks. That way you can be more objective when you start shaping and polishing. Before I read a few poems and then turn the mic over to Mary, what are your questions? Questions are the best part of the evening. Thank you. Taylor.
So which of the two methods do you use?
Which one of those methods? If I get bored with one or one doesn't work, I just turn to the other.
Which one do you use most often?
And the one I use most often, because I tend to be a pretty emotional guy, it has its plus and minuses, as those of you who feel you're emotional know, but it works wonders with poetry. Just close your eyes. What am I feeling now? Am I feeling outrage? I couldn't sleep. Am I feeling gratitude? I could sleep. Am I feeling distant because I'm not sleeping with anybody? Am I feeling euphoric because I just slept with somebody? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And then what image can you summon, or what sound can you summon that seems to be related to whatever the emotion is? Yes?
I know you said not to worry about the style of poetry, but is there a particular one that, because I know each one, it focuses on something different. Is there one that helps with your writing the best?
Is there one that
Is
helps?
there a style of writing that helps you with your technical writing?
Oh, that's a great question. And I wrote down here to repeat the question so that everybody could hear it. And let me see if I'm repeating it right. Is there one style of poem that helps most in technical writing? Yeah. If you use standard forms like sonnet, villanelle, heroic verse, which is 6 beats to a line, you're concentrating more as much on the form as you are on the substance. So as far as helping with your technical writing, I would suggest free verse or prose poems. And I would concentrate. The most powerful sense is called the haptic sense. It's touch, touch, touch. And I suspect it's the most powerful because when we were little and didn't even know where we were, either our mother held us or slapped us around, but it all had to do with touch. And yeah. And also, if you can get touch, touch is the most powerful in my experience. Sounds are the second most powerful. Smells are the third most powerful. Everybody uses sight, what something looks like. So if it's almost like a cliche. You have to use sight, but it's almost like a cliche. So if you can come up with, like, walk your fingers through the yellow pages. You know, in a way that's a cliche, but in another sense, it's a different way. New thought, best thought. I mean, it's a new way of expressing a common occurrence. So to sum up your question, I think I'd say, if you're trying to prove your technical writing, that's the reason you're working on poetry, forget form, concentrate on verbs of the engine. Verbs are the engines of everything you write. Verbs, verbs, verbs. And an example I used to use when teaching poetry was, how much more powerful is it to say she limped into the room than she came into the room? Limped is a power verb. Came is a blah verb. Use power verbs. Other questions?
I have one that's not
Good.
exactly related to the poetry, but you worked for Sunset Magazine?
I did.
Why did you leave it?
I got fired.
Oh, it's such a great magazine. I was trying to think, you know, and it has such diversity. I was trying to think, you're right, that is so different to me than Silicon Valley, right?
Tell them why you got fired.
Yeah, I'm interested in this.
Yeah, I adjust. This is another tip, actually. I'll bet you it's still the way it's done. I got the best performance report I'd ever had with Sunset. I'd been with them a long time.
20
And the
some
next
years.
week,
Yeah.
I was the first one coming into my boss's office for the message,
The pink slip.
the pink slip. Time Warner had just bought out Sunset Magazine books. And they wanted to get rid, I was in my mid-50s, as I recall, or early 50s. And I also have a skill, it turns out, of selling things. And they were having to cut my commissions quite a bit so that the district managers would not get jealous. And it was just a situation where Time Warner was tired of fooling around, and they wanted to just slim down, bring their own people in, and many of us over 45 were let go. Actually, it turned out to be a blessing, as these things often do. You know, you cry your night or two and shiver and get very nervous about it all, and oh, poor me, and I'm not worthwhile. And then, the hell with this. I'd always wanted to have a writing business, and we made far more money than I ever made with Sunset. But Sunset was a good outfit to work with, and the Lane brothers owned it. It was a private organization. It was a wonderful outfit to work with.
So was your Yale degree in journalism?
It was in English literature.
Oh, it was in literature?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what kinds of things did you write for Sunset? Articles
Mostly
on
for the books, actually.
Furniture?
Let's see. As you may know, Lane Publishing Company encompassed Sunset Magazine and Sunset Books. And I was mostly on the book side
I see.
as far as writing goes, and they were how to do it books. Basic
that
plumbing
was
illustrated,
technical.
home wiring, upholstery and slip covers. And that could be the subject of a whole lecture.
Yeah, but I can see how that led you then into technical writing,
Yeah,
as opposed to doing recipes and decor.
Right.
Which is what I read Sunset for.
that's right. And also, we were in the heart of the largest concentration of innovation outside, Israel, I think. I mean, now we've got the Boston area, Seattle area, the Austin area. But Silicon Valley was just loaded with these minds that
Still
were
is.
concentrated on make it faster, make it smaller, make it more fun to work. And there were a lot of companies that weren't well financed, and at first I started doing, because it was easier to get jobs with them, but to get paid was not an easy thing to do often. Any other questions? All right, thank you. And I'm going to now read some poetry. This is my second volume of poems. By the way, I should say something about why write at all. I mean, how many? I think there were 60,000 titles published, new titles published in this country last year. I mean, come on. There's got to be a fire burning of some sort. There's got to be something. It's not that easy to write. Bad or well, and most people hate rewriting. I've been at it for decades. I still kind of, oh my God, I get up in the morning, oh my God, it's draft number 4. I did that with a speech. I mean, thanks to Mary and Tom, we worked hard on this speech, worked hard. And unless there's something that's driving you to put things that you love to think about words or describe things with words rather than paint or with devices, there's really no point to it unless, frankly, if you want to go for big money in a niche area, marketing communications and technical communications are a great area. You're like translators. You talk to engineers, you get all the technobabble, you get all the polysyllabics, and you have to translate those into not only readable but pleasurable prose for executives and editors to read. And it's, if you love words, it's a niche that still needs a lot of warm bodies to fill. Okay. So anyway, writing poetry helped me relax. I mean, it was not easy work that Doreen and I did. The saying in the Valley was you can do technical, we called ourselves MARCOM writers, marketing communications. And the word was you can do it for 7 years, and then either you hire somebody else to do it, you become an administrator, which I hate doing, or you hightail it into the desert. That's the way it used to go. So you hire somebody or you hightail it into the desert. We got greedy because we were doing so well, we stayed for an extra year, and both of us ended up in the hospital when we got to Santa Fe. Okay, 6 poems. Here's the first. And these demonstrate what I was saying, some of the 2 tricks I was talking about how to get started. The first poem is called Affliction. It's a sad poem. And I woke up that morning, the strongest emotion I felt was grief. I woke up feeling very bad that my sister had taken her life. Affliction. Whether or not you are or care, believing numbs and salts the sting of watching the tips of my sister's fingers crack. Hearing her voice a hunted crow's, the night she finally managed to go. Pills spilling from her hand at dinner like daisies dotting her romaine. Did you guide her slump to the bathroom tiles? Was her muscle relaxant your holy bread? Myself surgically split like butterflied lamb last spring, whether cobbled together by grace or $1,000 bills, I winced to see the morning wind beat and Anna's Hummer back against the patio wall, battling to reach a penstemon blossom, throat and crown feathers tossing like Fra Angelico flame. The second poem, I'm a peacenik. I sat for peace at the state capitol for several years. This poem supplies the title to the book. You'll notice references to touch, sound, and smell in this poem. And that, I should say, is one of the big advantages of rewriting, to talk yourself into rewriting. You get it all down first, as Miriam says, and then when you go back to the poem, you can think about your craft. You know, you've learned that touch is the most powerful sense and sound, and you can start inserting stuff like this to make the lines more impactful. At least that's how I work. Target practice, it's called. It's a made-up poem based on some of my observations while sitting Buddhist style on the Capitol steps. To stop her rage at my country's lust to preempt, I've unfolded my chair near the Pray for Peace sign, skewering the lawn that graces our state capitol. Nearby, a guy's cupping his knees, and 2 sandaled girls kneel on mats. How I'd love to turn those legislators clacking up the concrete path, chattering into cell phones, or cajoling secretaries under the rows of pear trees into pacifists, quiet as we are. One who just beat-blocked his truck stares over, dress shirt festooning his belly, sombrero cocked. Tossing her crow-black cascade, his secretary rises off pumps to kiss his earlobe and leads him across the low chain, stay off the grass. Is that honeysuckle she soaked herself in? Scram in your double-breasted gabardine, eyes sleep deprived. Your boss's boots unsteady our ground. As I steeple my fingers and tuck my chin, her heel slams my sternum. And to their laughter, I'm whirling backward into the world. Several poems in the book invoke J.S. Bach's music, and this is one that does. This poem, how did it get a start? I had been listening to some of Bach's cantatas the night before, and I woke up singing one of the tunes. I thought, okay. However, Bach only comes into it at the end. Give us this day. Why did you give me this ant-swarming mind, these burst bladder emotions, to send me scuttling towards stupa, synagogue, mosque, or cathedral? Hog-tie me in ritual? Or simply to relish my outrage at rum bottles and needle caps picked up on walks? My twisting intestine when I see that bristle-headed father jerking his daughter toward heaven to slap her. Give thanks for what is. Is that what you're asking? For the mother's shrieks, as well as Bach's suites for unaccompanied cello. Forgive me, this morning I'm cowering under the covers. This is what's called a persona poem. In other words, it's not autobiographical, but it takes on a persona. I become another character. And it addresses an issue I have deep fears about. Remember, when you're writing poetry, one of the glories of writing even bad poetry is you can afford to be honest. It's a way of letting yourself be really honest with yourself. Nobody has to read it. You can tear it up and do it whatever you want with it. You're the boss. Overpopulation. You want me to take another slice of ham? More rosé? My stomach already sounds like the dishwasher. Next Sunday, 1 serving of egg salad and buttermilk, or I'm not coming over. You think I don't love you if I don't bolt for the toilet. And why must I praise your hundreds of Hummel figurines? Sure, you're my ma, but I gag seeing shelffuls of alpine dancers ogling squadrons of pretzel boys. I wish you just had me. Did you truly need 9? They're breeding like fleas, Ma. I can't keep up with the birthdays. I can't do it. Here's one dedicated to my former editor at Sunset Books. It's for Margaret. Her name was Margaret. It's called Emergency Plumbing Illustrated. You rise and flush. A rusty bridal veil bubbles out. You curse your ex. From a dresser, grab the book he wrote. Fan pages while your slippers sponge the muck. You lift the porcelain top and plunge into the cold. But the float ball's arm won't budge. As you turn to rush the phone, Emergency Plumbing Illustrated flops into the bowl, drowning proof that young men still believe they can save the world. Another of the, for me, freeing things about writing poetry is you can become anyone you want. You can become a male, a female, a homosexual, a lesbian, heterosexual. You can be anything you want and do it on the page with words. And then if you like it, then you edit in a few weeks. If you don't like it, you tear it up. You're ashamed. Oh my God, what have I done? Bam, into the wastebasket. Okay, and the last poem. It's the last poem in the book. And it's called After Cryo Transport, Low. I'll pay to freeze my death in nitrogen. Tympanic probes in each ear canal. Down, dairy down to centigrade minus. Dry ice cold with my new family in stainless steel. Patient as robots until nanomedicine pops us out, disease-free, hetero, homo, or how we please. Gawking at squawking flocks of titanium ravens patrolling dingy skies. Holy cerebrums, humming like combustion turbines, pushing our race beyond 3 lifetimes. Praise him from whom all blessings flow. And now, Mary.
Thank you, Michael. That was very enjoyable. We have more to hear. So I thought that was very nice of Michael to invite me to actually read one of my poems. And I'm just going to read one because it is pretty long. So it's called Transfiguration. The broken marble everywhere was enough to make her want to dance. But she couldn't dance because of all the people watching. Well, they weren't people exactly, but they were kind of people anyway. People enough that she'd be embarrassed dancing now before them. So tourist-like, as if she didn't belong here, which she didn't. And she did. She took pictures and roamed through the ruins, imagining almost to remembering what they used to be, and thanked the gods that she was the only one here of her kind anyway, so she had the freedom to be undisturbed. At first she'd been amazed that the Forum was so large, and then she thought, of course, it's the Forum. Fabulous victory parades marched here and here and here on this mighty road. She wondered, whose sandal touched here? Someone she knew? Poor Julius or Mark or Cleopatra. She knelt to the ground and pressed her ear to the royal rubble and listened for the sound of a footstep that had to be there if only she could hear it. For what was really keeping her ear from the sound of Caesar's shoe? Really, what? He'd been there, she was there. She'd been there, he was there, more real than her, for this was his place, not hers. His marble, carved and laid for his age, meant for his foot, and she believed that all the marble knew it, and she knew it, that the marble lived when they lived, and the spirit that ties them never dies. It blows still heat and preserves with the mystic, quiet, and constant Roman sun. She found with her guidebook the temple of Julius Caesar and rested there, her head leaning back on what little was left, the cement work, the internal structure of the podium, near the altar, his altar, the altar of Caesar, and felt the heat of Rome. Closing her eyes and soaking that heat, breathing it in, her body a wet sponge, needing more heat, taking more heat until the sun, more timeless than that beneath her body, moved under her and supported her, then on top, covered her in layer after layer of constancy, layers so thick bodies could crowd in. And they did. And she knew they were looking at her. She pretended to sleep, but she felt them bending over her, hushed in wonder of who this alieness was, dressed so strangely with a black brick hanging on her neck, a slave from new parts brought in by their Caesar, or a new goddess maybe sent as a warning from angry Jupiter. One bent closer. She could hear his voice speaking the blessed sound of ancient tongue, and she wished that, damn it, she'd taken Latin instead of French. Now her heart beat so fast, for she knew she was there, really there with them, as it was always to be in a place like this, where time is the intruder more than she. She wanted so badly to open her eyes, to see them over her in their tunics and leaves, but the sun told her that sight was forbidden. So she bathed in the scent of perfumed ointments covering unwashed flesh, the sound of lyric voices, and the feel of the one's breath as he hovered over her. This clever man who breathed so close to her that now they were breathing in the very same eternal air. Somehow she knew that, somehow he knew that she wasn't asleep, and he knew her pretense was important. The longer she felt him, the more vital it became that he not go away, that she not break the spell by opening her eyes, and she knew he knew this too. So near the altar at Caesar's temple, where Mark re-speaks the eulogy for his forever friend, forever foe, she and he both prayed that this moment in time would harden like marble, so they could live together forever in this one deathless moment of her insight and his ecstasy.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to end the evening, except for more questions, with an excerpt from my second novel called Making Crazy. The three novels take place in Santa Fe, partly because it's a lot easier to research when you live in the place you're describing. Making Crazy, love Santa Fe style. And to set the scene, the scene takes place in a made-up college called Coleman College in Santa Fe, and it's in the librarian's office. The scene is in the librarian's office. The librarian is lesbian. She has just enticed a woman to come with her to the East Coast, a woman who has been married, but whose husband kicked her. And into this, and they're talking about what to do in the librarian's office when our hero, the poet, Derek, comes around the bend. She's outside at this point. She sees him coming. The librarian sees him coming, and she runs back into her office where the woman who's leaving her husband is sitting. Okay, here we go. She tells the librarian tells the gardener, "Tell your son to come see me tomorrow." "Oh, fuck," she blurted, spotting Derek, that's our poet, in flip-flops and green shorts, striding around the cafeteria's far corner, pack strapped on his shoulders. She rushed back under the portico. She raked a sheaf of hair behind her ear and pushed her office door open. The plywood "Don't bother me" sign jumped and swung back with a clap. Abigail sat hunched, cross-legged on the carpet near the window, crating Carlos. Carlos is a librarian's Mexican hairless. "Greer," the librarian said, "Derek Johansson's heading this way." Abby's hand slid from the hairless's spine and he jumped off her lap. Quote, "I can't deal with another specimen male today." Chad's probably told him everything about what happened this morning. Chad is Abigail's husband. Abby's right breast throbbed like a toothache. Cupping the right side of her bra, she rose to a knee and stood. "Sweetheart, you're shaking." "Of course I'm shaking. I can't absorb anymore. What'll I do?" Greer sprang to her desk, opened the bottom drawer, pried her purse apart, felt for her keys, and dragged them out. She slipped one off its ring. "There's no screen in my office window. Take this house key and scram." Abigail zipped it into her tummy purse and heaved at the sash. Greer joined her. The window lifted with a screech, catalyzing Carlos into a series of high-pitched yips. "Steady, hombre," Greer panted to him. She pushed at Abby's fanny. Abby had managed to secure one knee on the sill. In other words, she's trying to get out the window fast, when 4 knocks shook the door. "Can't you read?" Greer yells out. "This can't wait." Derek burst in and tilted his head up. "Who's that?" "I'm calling security right now, Derek." Greer sidestepped toward her phone. "Abby Hop? What's she doing here? Abby, what is this?" "Greer, I'm saying please don't lift that receiver." My skirt's caught on a nail, Abigail moaned, her neck stretched under the sash that hovered like a guillotine. Greer glared at Derek. She's trying to refasten one of the wires holding my chipmunk feeder, and it's none of your business. She went to stand beside Abby's shoulder, then stretched her arm to release the skirt's hem. Derek says, I don't see any chipmunk feeder. Oh, shut up, you meathead. Gasping, Abigail eased her knee down, turned to face Derek, and leaned against the sill. She smoothed her hair and waited for his accusations to begin. Derek says, perhaps it's good that you're both here because I've got some news. But Abby, your pocket's torn, your skirt's a mess. You fell somewhere? Realizing that Chad must not yet have talked to Derek, yes, was all Abigail answered. Derek, goddammit, Greer said, I've got to meet with someone in a few minutes. Speak your piece, will you? He spread his flip-flops to steady himself and shoved his fists into his pockets. Abigail moved to the armchair and scooped up Carlos. All right, I need to tell you that Natalie, that's his wife, and I have decided to separate. Very bad vibrations, but I've met another woman. Abby, it's the woman who came to your front door a week ago with a poem about Chad's bowl. Abigail guffawed. That's amusing? Derek asked. Weird, like everything. I'll give you that. Listen, Greer, I have to know that what you told me last Thursday is how you really feel. My life is too complex and I need to simplify fast. Excuse me, Abby, but I have to say this. His eyes shifted. I want to stop fantasizing sex acts with other women, and especially with you. With me? Abigail managed, clapping a palm to her chest. With Greer. The two women stood speechless. He freed his fists from his pockets, bent his knees, and clasped his hands behind him. Well, just what was it that I told you, Derek? Says Greer, and he says that you hate men, and I'm supposing hate me most of all. Greer rolled her eyes toward the ceiling and back down to his. I have no words for what you are to me, Derek, except an unbelievable jerk. Get out. He tried to steel his voice into a monotone. You won't see me again. Good. Quivering, he grabbed a strap, heaved the pack from his shoulders, hoisted the professor's manuscript she had given him to index, ripped off the rubber band, and slung its 400 pages across the carpet. Not worth my time. The prose stinks. No charge. He wheeled, opened the door, and stomped past the glass case displaying editions of Goethe's Faust. Thank you. So now we have time for more questions. If anybody has one. What's the difference between writing prose and poetry? Anyone want to know that? Taylor's nodding.
You don't use very bad language.
I don't use bad language?
Yeah.
I use fuck once.
But that isn't common.
Not in today's world. I know. Bad language, to my way of thinking, is a cop-out. It's easy to write it in there, especially fucking, fucked, fucked. You see it all the time. And it's, you know, the thing you gotta, how poetry and prose are the same, is you've got, at all costs, to try to avoid cliches. If a reader even sniffs that she or he is reading something that they've read before because of the cliches, you know, bright as a noon sun or blue as the sky. Those are the easy things to write. That's what happens in the first draft. You got to route that stuff out. You got to be ruthless. And the only way I found to do it is multiple drafts, having put each draft in a drawer for 2 weeks, at least. And so I try not to use bad language for that, mainly for that reason. The other thing is that you might have noticed this is usually called spare prose. It's one way of writing. I happen to like it. It means you cut out a lot of the thes, the a's. Instead of saying in order to do this, you just say to do this. It pleases me, that's all. I mean, as I said before, 60,000 titles published last year. Who needs it? Except we're writers. If we're writers, we burn. It makes us feel better. We do it. And so you can choose to write whatever you like, in whatever style you like. Noreen.
Can I just add something that I found in that's really helped me? A particular form of poetry that helped in technical writing, and it helps in writing my poetry in general. And that if you have any interest at all, and it takes quite a bit of study, so it's not just something you say, oh, I can do that, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it was great fun. And I think for people with technical minds, it's great fun. And that's haiku. Consider looking into that. If that interests you. If it doesn't, you know, no reason. But I have to say that it's been an incredible tool for me as far as focus, you know, the power of the word in very few words. Let's throw that out.
Right, and there are two forms of haiku now, you might know. There's a three-line haiku, and then there's a straight across line of haiku.
Well, that's always been, yeah.
Jack Kerouac.
And you don't have to follow the old, you know, the way it used to be. It's much more open now than it used to be, and it's a great thing to study. It's just so much fun.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Taylor?
I'm just kind of curious how you like got the idea to write that book or your other first book. Like what idea came to you?
This book, Make You Crazy?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the second novel. The first novel is called Acting Badly. I got very sick after we left Silicon Valley. We'd done too much. We got greedy for the money I talked about. And I got my reward by ending up in the hospital in Santa Fe. And I had 4 surgeries, belly surgeries. And when I got out of that, I decided that rather than trying to keep our business going, accumulate more money, to hell with it, fold it up. I go back to school, get an MFA, and I admire poetry more than any other verbal art form. And so I decided, okay, with whatever years I have left, I'm going to be a poet. I'm going to try to, you know, personal best. And so there I was, working, doing all the things I've shared with you tonight, trying to get better at it, making friends with poets. And then it became apparent that Bush was actually going to invade Iraq. Colin Powell proved to us why it was necessary. W launched our troops out of, I forget where, Kuwait, I think. And for some reason, I don't put a lot of time into being a political animal, but it so upset me that we actually were going to initiate preemptive war that the poetry couldn't hold the emotions I felt. The poetry couldn't do it. And I have never seen baptism. I've never been baptized by fire, as they say in the Army. I've never been in a shooting situation. I was in the reserves. I thought, I don't really know what that's like, and but I do know that if a parent, if a head of a family, if the head of a company, if the head of a country acts badly, shows her or his dark side, those who are within the embrace of that leader will subconsciously feel they've been given permission to show their bad sides. We all have our bad sides. Many of us are humanists and we try to act civilized. But if the leader is doing something that seems to enough people to be an immoral act, to hell with it, we'll do it. And I did notice that in Silicon Valley, the companies where the leader was, especially Hewlett Packard, he was admired as a leader. He led by walking around. He'd walk around a lot. Bill Hewlett, find out what his managers were doing. Anyway, I do know how people act, or at least that's something I can contemplate. So I set the first novel in Santa Fe showing a bunch of people, a mortgage broker, an aromatherapist, let me think, a poet, there was a poet in there too, changing or letting loose the deep-set other dark sides that we all have, and they did each other dirt. And there was some bad language in that book, and bad acts. And then my publisher, turned out, he liked it so much, he said, why don't you do a second one? And by that time, a guy named Peter McCarthy liked it so much, he took an option on it to do a TV series, which he still hasn't sold, but anyway. So that, I got some feedback, positive feedback, so I started this book. And then I was getting pretty worn out, and I thought, well, whatever time I have left, I've always wanted to write a thriller. So my third book, that's hopefully coming out this year, Smut Busters it's called, it deals with the homeless. And my heroes are homeless men and women who break a blackmail ring dealing with weekend sex. They break it wide open, and the ones who get broken want to punish these homeless guys, and so they try to kill them, and it doesn't work. So hopefully that's my attempt at a thriller, and I had a lot of fun researching that baby. I have a friend who was in the housing department in Santa Fe, and she told me where the homeless congregate. And so I found a site, and my publisher didn't want me to go, but I wore old clothes, and I tried to look as homeless as I could. And I just patrolled the site, took notes, all the different weeds that were growing, the trees, what the smells were, right? What it felt like touching the trunks of these charred trees. So as far as I'm concerned personally, as I said, it's a personal deal. There's no other reason to do it. It's the best book I've written, and I can't wait till it's published. That's a long answer to your question. Any more questions? Oh, Karen.
Is that the most extreme you've done as far as research goes?
Okay, I'll tell you a secret. Yeah, Noreen knows this. It's dealing with internet sex. This sex ring, what they do is there's a hacienda, a made-up hacienda in Santa Fe, where a couple who used to be hedge fund managers in New York came and set up a website to lure lonely people, sex-starved people, curious people, whatever, to come for weekends. And they publicized it as not as a porno place to come, but mental and emotional health. Regain your mental and emotional health through hands-on therapy. And I've seen some porno sites, but I don't tend to spend a lot of time with them. I didn't really have more things to do than that. I don't really know a lot about it. So what I did, you ready? I went to Borders, And I looked in the sociology section, and by God, here was a book called Sex on the Internet. So I bought the book, I contacted the author, and this is all true now. Kind of unbelievable, it still is to me. The author is a woman covered with tattoos, great bazooms, great massive coiled hair. She has a master's in business, I believe, from Columbia University, turns out. I've never met her, I've just seen her picture. And I said, how much would you charge? She started out after she graduated from Columbia becoming a prostitute, and now she's the editor of a magazine for what they're called sex workers. She's the editor. She's very literate. And I said, what would you charge to set up an imaginary sex website for me? And she charged me, I think it was $100, $50, and then another $50. And this website, I defy anybody to read this first chapter and not believe this website exists. It does not exist. So there you go. I tried to make this book so believable, and there's a lot about cocaine in this book. But hey, I know nothing about cocaine. I do know something about alcohol, but I don't know nothing about cocaine. So I hired a guy who's been clean and sober for 26 years, cocaine addict, an addict, and we got to be good buddies. It's fascinating what he taught me. He taught me, for instance, that you can usually tell if you're a street person or you're on the street a lot, if you to pin a cocaine dealer, you can tell by the kind of jewelry. It's usually a man, young man, what they wear. They love to be flashy. They love flash for some reason, and that's how you tell. So I made my cocaine dealer have a lot of jewelry, and so forth.
And tell them what you learned about the extent of sex on the internet at the time you wrote this.
Oh my gosh. Here's another mind blower. Do you want another mind blower? I guess so. When we were doing work for the Electric Power Research Institute, Noreen and I, one of the guys there had a pal who worked for Intel. And his pal told, his name was Tom, and Tom told me that the reason, the hidden reason that Microsoft and Intel and Applied, what is it, Applied, I can't think of Intel's rival, and some of the other big companies are doing so well is that they develop software and hardware specifically for internet sex. That it's so big and so dark that it's never publicized, and it's part of the defense industry, and internet sex is part of what's keeping the country going, and it's spreading all over the world. That's what I heard. That's what he told me. So, any other questions?
I was going to ask you about titles, because I always love titles.
Oh, sure.
And some of them I get right away, but I wasn't, when I was listening to your poems, I do remember all of them, but what is your approach to titles? I mean, I get the whirling backward.
Pardon me?
Whirling backward, was that one in it?
Whirling backward into the world.
Yeah, and then you read that poem, right? And
right.
It ended with the
It has
and
the
then
last
the
line.
overpopulation.
Yeah.
The 9 brothers. But I mean, I always think titles are really important.
Oh, they are.
And so you've talked about, power verbs and things like that. What is your sort of technique for titles? Or do you...
Okay, well, I have a basic rule of thumb about titles.
Good.
The poetry industry, the publishing industry that deals with poetry is comprised as much of guerrilla warfare as getting assignments in Silicon Valley writing marketing documents. It's very, very competitive. And unless you're an academic and ambitious for yourself, you don't have much of a chance getting your poetry published. So this is the same for writing articles. I used to write a lot of articles for the San Francisco Opera, which was my real love, and the ballet magazine. There's no money in it, but I loved doing it, you know. I had a pen name while I was working for Sunset because they didn't want you to do that. And the rule of thumb about titles and first two sentences is grab the reader. However you can grab the reader, grab her or him, because otherwise you won't get read. So it seemed to me that, for instance, Overpopulation, I think that poem's been published in a little magazine, I forget. I guess not. Yeah, Santa Clara Review. Seemed to me it's a big topic everybody's thinking about, so I thought I'd call it. And then I'd surprise the editor by, instead of a treatise on overpopulation, I'd make it funny. You know, surprise. That's a trick you learn in writing, in any kind of writing, but especially poetry. End breaks are wonderful chances to bring a surprise in the next line. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
And that's what
Editors love
haiku
it.
does.
Haiku does it.
That's what the end of a haiku does.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'll tell you, I think we're running out of time, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions, and I'll be back there with the books. If you want to buy one, great. If you only want a handout, they're back there. Thanks again.